Hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook. My name is Mark, and I'm an 8th grade English teacher. The title of this video is The Left Must Fight It Out, a discussion on voting and debate. There is a lot of talk on the left about the dangers of ideological purity, how infighting will only lead to another victory for Trump, and the imperative that we must stop attacking Democratic candidates and come together as a united voice for 2020. I understand the gut reaction to hearing criticisms of a candidate, especially those that we tend to like. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about. As someone who has been a longtime supporter of both Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders, criticism is about all you hear. But as frustrating and uncomfortable as these criticisms may make us feel, having hard, challenging, in-depth debates over the candidates who are now vying for the Democratic Party nomination is essential. The entire purpose of a primary is to select the one candidate that we feel not only represents our values, but has the best chance of winning. This cannot happen without vigorous debate. Sitting quietly in our seats and letting the candidates frame who they are without verifying their assertions or looking into their past history is wildly irresponsible. Does anyone really need to be told that Donald Trump will not oblige us these same courtesies? Does anyone really need to be told that whoever is the nominee is going to face a firestorm of scrutiny and attacks? Now is the time to stress test those who have thrown their hat into the ring and are asking for our support. The left must fight this out. If you like a candidate, stand up and say why. If you don't like a candidate, stand up and say why. Stand up and make your case. Tell us why either a candidate doesn't work for you or why you are drawn to another. And when someone else does the same thing, don't disparage them for participating in expanding the parameters of the debate. Show them the respect they are showing you by taking your position and your ability to argue for it seriously. Debate them, and debate them honestly. Now, don't get me wrong, I am totally opposed to attacking someone with smears, personal attacks, or false accusations. There's no place for that. But criticizing a candidate's stance on policy is not just acceptable, it's essential. And those who warn against it are not looking out for your best interests. Any talk that open criticism damages candidates is nonsense. In 2016, the Republicans had one of the most vicious primaries I can recall. Yet the candidate who emerged victorious went on to win the White House. Show me someone arguing against inter-party debate, and I'll show you someone who knows their side has deep vulnerabilities that they are desperate to hide. Anyone afraid of open, public debate that's honest is a coward and has no place in politics. When it comes to the presidency, we are not auditioning an actor for a part in a movie called America. We are interviewing candidates for the most powerful position in the world. This is a process which should be a gauntlet designed to weed out all but the best of the best. That is why I welcome criticisms of Bernie. In fact, I say bring it. Allow me to hear your concerns, and then allow me to defend him or agree with what you have to say. If there is a better candidate, I want to know it. But before we can really vet the 2020 candidates, we must do something that I fear not enough of us are doing. We must vet ourselves. We must scrutinize how we are choosing our candidates by asking, Am I using the most rational, the most logical method to determine my candidate of choice? And this leads me to what I really want to talk about, which is how we vote. Because as I listen to people debate and argue over their candidates, what I have realized is that what is at the root of most of our disagreements is not really the candidates themselves, but why we have picked our candidate. Except the problem is we don't realize this. Arguing for a candidate that you have selected using one set of criteria against a person who has picked another candidate using very different criteria, without understanding that you are each evaluating your two different candidates in very different ways, gets you nowhere. For example, let's say you and your partner are going shopping for a car. Now, before you leave to go to the dealership, you yourself decide that gas mileage is most important, as you have a much longer commute and you don't want to have to go broke filling up the gas tank. Your partner, however, decides that cargo space is the most important because he or she has a weekend delivery business and needs that feature when it is their turn to use the car. Now, if you don't make your partner aware of how you are going to be evaluating potential cars, if you don't agree to the process by which you will choose the car, you're going to have a very difficult and frustrating time agreeing on which one to buy. Arguing over candidates without first understanding the criteria that is important to each person inevitably produces similar complications. But it goes deeper than that, because some methods of choosing are far better than others, and some are far worse. If you are choosing based on an illogical or faulty premise, your conclusion must necessarily be suspect, if not rejected out of hand. To illustrate this point, I want you to imagine that there are 3 trains. One is a gorgeously restored, mid-century, modern luxury traveler. The second one is a sleek, technologically cutting-edge, high-speed train. And the third is not even a passenger train at all, just a bunch of open box cars that you can climb into. Which one do you want to take? Which one should you take? Which one is the best? Now, most people would probably be drawn to the first 2 trains for their obviously superior comfort. All things being equal, those 2 trains would be perfectly acceptable choices. And truthfully, at the end of the day, if you really didn't care about comfort, it would actually make no difference which of the 3 trains you got on. But there's something about trains we've forgotten to consider. There's something about a train much more important than what it looks like. And that is the fact that trains are always going somewhere. So now, when I tell you the first 2 trains, the beautiful mid-century modern one and the sleek high-speed train, are each on a track that goes right off a cliff. And the third train, the one with the open box cars, is on a track that goes around the cliff safely. Now which train do you get on? I think we can confidently say that everyone would now choose the third train, the open box cars. Unfortunately, so many voters continue to avoid considering that candidates, just like trains, are always going somewhere very specific. Instead, rather than focusing on the destination, discussions fixate on the packaging, the image, on a candidate's identity. In many cases, at the urging of the candidates themselves. Things are said like, "Oh, I like that candidate a lot. He's really passionate. He brings people together." Or, "The future is female. It's time for our first woman president." Or, "Wow, young, gay, and super smart. I'm in. And I think that those are all, while very well intentioned, incredibly dangerous reasons to vote for someone. Because what voting on identity does is assume a destination without knowing for sure. That train is so elegant. Of course it's going someplace nice. That train is so modern. Of course it's going somewhere innovative. Representation is super important. Absolutely. And we definitely want a government that looks like the general public. But privileging these surface qualities over other considerations, or worse, assuming that those qualities are some kind of guarantee as to a candidate's direction, in lieu of finding out for sure, is just as dangerous, in fact, even more so, as getting on a train without first checking to see where the tracks are headed. So, my first question to you is this. The candidate for 2020 that you most admire, that you're leaning towards, what are you basing that on? Are you basing it on that candidate giving you a very clear breakdown of where their tracks are headed? Or are you drawn to them because of the way they make you feel, who they are as a person, or the cultural group you think they represent? Now, hopefully you'll agree with me that supporting a candidate without knowing anything about what policies they stand for is a big mistake. So let's talk about a situation that is far more common, but just as problematic. And that is trying to straddle the line between being an issues voter and an identity voter. A person that falls into this camp is a voter that knows the issues, knows what is at stake, knows where the candidates stand, but does not support the candidate that is best on the issues. This is a voter who compromises on a candidate's position on the issues and on their own personal ethics because of their candidate's identity. This may not have made a big difference in the past, but due to the problems we face today, on the major issues, half solutions may be just as bad as no solutions. This gets to the issue that I began with. People arguing that we must not attack each other, that we must protect the Democratic candidates because any candidate is better than Trump. One line of reasoning that I frequently hear to support this notion goes something like this. By insisting too hard on one's principles, we make the best the enemy of the good. That by being unwilling to compromise, we'll miss a chance at incremental improvement. I think this line of reasoning is incredibly flawed because it assumes that incremental change, that going with better rather than best, is always an acceptable compromise because it's never less than at least benign. In many cases, this may be true. Say, if your lawn is dying and you have 3 options, water daily, twice a week, or don't water at all. In this case, incrementalism is just fine. Some water is better than none if you can't afford to water every day. However, if you are in a car speeding at 80 miles an hour towards the edge of a cliff, suggesting that you slow down to 60 miles an hour is not going to save you. Only stopping the car and turning it around, going in a radically different direction, is going to do that. Well, like the car and the cliff, the incrementalist approach to major national and global solutions does nothing to address the root of these problems. And right now, small Band-Aid solutions are not the answer. We need deep and massive systemic change. When it comes to major crises, like the collapse of the environment, half measures are worthless. Yet, this is what so many candidates want you to believe. They want you to believe that delay is just as good as desist. But what is the difference between being in a car speeding at 80 miles or one speeding at 60 miles an hour towards a cliff? How much is that extra bit of time before you go plummeting over the edge really going to be worth to you? Accepting that climate change is real, but not fully backing real solutions like the Green New Deal is effectively just as bad as those climate deniers who offer nothing. The same can be said for those claiming to address with half measures our healthcare crisis, our education deficit, and our endless wars. Knowing where a candidate really stands on these issues is paramount. And politicians, being as they are, frequently avoid or obscure where they stand. It is only through public debate, public criticism, and the public defense of a candidate's positions that we can have any hope of making solid evaluations. Now, in 2016, enough people started to say that half measures weren't good enough. They started to insist on voting on their principles. And so we began hearing about voting tactically. Yes, these people would say, we agree with you that your candidate is better on the issues, but unfortunately, they can't win. You'll be throwing your vote away if you stick with them. You'll be responsible for our awful opponent winning. So, here we come to the most important question any voter can ask themselves. If we agree that voting based on principles is ideally best, what is the principled voter? The one who wants to pick based on ethics. What are they to do when there is no major candidate that supports the issues that are important to them? Do you vote for a candidate you dislike that, while being better than their opponent, doesn't stand for the policies and positions you know are crucial? Or do you vote third party? Do you go with a candidate, no matter how small their chance of winning, that has the moral, principled positions that you want to see supported? Well, let us first state for the record, if 2016 taught us anything, we have certainly learned that assertions about which candidate has the higher chance of winning can be rather unreliable. But more importantly, whenever discussions of voting for a third-party candidate come up, people love to tell you that it's a wasted vote, that you are taking your responsibility as an American citizen and throwing it in the trash. But the fact of the matter is, any vote that is cast for someone is never thrown away. It is most definitely going somewhere, and it is most definitely being counted. And anything being counted is not being thrown away. It is absolutely being used. But if you cast your vote for someone you actually don't like, then without a doubt, something is being thrown away. Not your vote, but your voice. When you vote for a candidate that doesn't align with your principles, when you vote for someone purely because someone else told you to, because they're better than the opposition, what's lost is what it is you wanted. What's lost is a little check mark in the column of things you'd like to see. That's what's being thrown away. Worse, it's being thrown away and picked up by the person who told you to vote like them. And now that person has two checks. They get a place in their column. And if they get enough people to listen to them, they might end up with millions of check marks in their columns. Millions of check marks that might have gone elsewhere. Every one of those little check marks sitting in a column where it really doesn't want to be, each and every one of them represents a chance to be heard, a chance that was thrown away. But when you vote based on principles, even if you vote for a candidate that never had a chance, even if the opposition wins, your ideas, your desires, your principles actually win as well, because they will have made their mark. They will have been heard, especially by the side that is best positioned to act on them, your side. For a political party, losing is the best corrective. Losing because a party failed to listen to the principled stands of a significant number of its members is the fastest way to see positive change enacted. Look at the 2016 outcome. Because the Democrats lost to Donald Trump, because enough people said no to a candidate who was not interested in Medicare for all, who was not interested in protecting and expanding unions, living wages, or making the environment a priority, who was not interested in removing corporate money from campaigning. Because so many people said no, we are now in a world where any candidate who wants to be legitimately considered for the Democratic nomination must at least pretend to support these issues. That is astounding. This would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. This is a sea change that would never have happened. These are issues that would never have been given the prominence they deserve if Hillary had won. Putting principles first, making principles a line in the sand, is the tactically superior action. Now, if the candidate you prefer not only stands for the principles you insist on and seems to be the tactically superior candidate, great. Or if you have two candidates that are identical on the issues, then by all means go with the one that seems to have the tactical advantage, or the one that seems more likable, more charismatic, or the one that will increase diversity as the tiebreaker. The upside to this whole strategy, what's really awesome about it, is that eventually, if voters expect policy first, great policy first, the Democratic Party will begin providing a host of candidates who toe the principled policy line, which will then give primary voters the ability to legitimately look for charisma and diversity as the deciding factor, the best of both worlds. Regardless, in the end, we must argue all this out. We must debate. We must prepare for the fight ahead. And when we do, let us first argue on our principles. Let us first decide where we want to go. And if we can find common ground on these issues, which I believe we can, then we must collectively discuss who is best, not better, on the issues. Who is best positioned to fight for and achieve them. So, the candidate you most admire, why are you supporting them? Our country and the world is swiftly approaching a cliff. How is your candidate going to save us from it? Thank you.